All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you today. It is the 10th day of April, 2025. Amazing how time flies, doesn't it? It's just remarkable. Even bad times, I think we're living through those pretty obviously, and yet we see days keep moving forward. It's really remarkable. And as we get older, we definitely see it happen more quickly. I don't know how I feel about that. I've been despondent. I'm sure many of you feel the same way. Maybe many of you don't feel this way, but I'm not. My optimism is at such a low ebb right now that it's hard for me to even be looking forward, to another 30 perhaps years, perhaps more on this vale of tears. And there are so many tears trying here to just reduce a little bit the waterworks around the world, and it's been a very, very rough challenge, I must admit. All right, if you want to join me, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646, and maybe we'll get a little optimism with discussion as we move forward in today's program about some new faces who have announced that they're running for Congress in the Democratic Party. They're going to primary Democrats, and we have to be pleased about that. Certainly, we want to see a new guard in that party. I mean, the question is, can they reform the party? Will they reform? Do they want to reform the party if they get elected? We have seen some of these newer, more progressive, ostensibly politicians, and they haven't, at least in my opinion, done much, if anything, to stem the authoritarian tide that has been on the rise through Republican and Democratic administrations for decades. So we'll get to Kat Abu Ghazaleh, I believe is how she pronounces her name, Saket Chakrabarti in California, and George Hornato. That was an easy one because it says rhymes with tornado. So George Hornato from Indianapolis are three candidates, and they're featured in various journals. The New York Times talks about Abu Ghazaleh and Hornato. I'm not sure where I read about Chakrabarti. Maybe it wasn't The Nation, not sure, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But first, as I always do, I'm going to center Gaza, the bloodiest place on the planet right now, the worst place probably to be if you're a parent, if you're a child, you're a human being. It's not where you want to be, tragically. This is from the Emirates News Agency. I have not used them as a source, but I have no reason to doubt that they're as accurate as any other. 40 killed, 146 wounded. I never talk about the wounded. I just bring up the death count. It just becomes too much, right, to talk about the injuries as well that the Israeli military, I've heard them called the IOF, right? I mean, they refer to themselves as the IDF, supposed to mean the Israeli Defense Force, but I heard, at least when I was on the mall the other day, Saturday rather, they were referred to as the IOF, so that would be the Israeli Offensive Force, and obviously that's what they are. They're not defending Israel, they're attacking Gaza. They're attacking Gazans. They're killing Palestinians, and they're providing the military force for empire and for colonialism. They killed 40 people in the past 24 hours. That would be Wednesday of this week. And I was off, by the way, yesterday. Took a sick day. I was not feeling great. Still a little congested. You may hear it. So, hey, throw me a line, 240-242-5646, if I can remember that correctly, so I don't have to do all the talking. I would love to get a little help as I go through this program. But you see 40 killed. I don't talk about the wounded, but obviously that's a terrible, terrible thing as well. People whose limbs are shot off, we know, blown off, shot off, permanent injuries of every dimension. We know some of those children that Israeli snipers and sharpshooters have shot in the head and chest aren't killed. They don't all die. Some of them survive, but obviously with massive trauma that can never be, completely cured, even if maybe some of those injuries are ultimately healed over. Obviously, the pain, the agony is going to be with you in your mind forever. There's presumably a mom holding the shrouded body of her baby. So this is what our military is doing. This is what our tax dollars, those are your tax dollars at work, folk. Your tax dollars at work, folks. And I can't think of anything more horrific, more horrible, that we're fully behind genocide, as we've been since October 20. Well, I mean, you could go back to 1948 if you want. I mean, certainly since October 7, when all the gloves came off and it was just purely Israel, just with zero restraint, killing, bombing, destroying. So we have 40 killed yesterday, Wednesday. The death count now up to 50,886 since October 7. And again, that's a very conservative number. And I was off yesterday, so we can say 36 if we do the math correctly, because I had 50,810 as of Tuesday. So now 2 days later, it's up 76 with 40 dead confirmed Wednesday. That would mean another 36 confirmed dead Tuesday, 76 in the past 2 days. And I give one final slide here before we'll move on to other topics, including that Supreme Court decision relating to immigrants, relating to deportations that Arlen discussed on Monday. That was the last, was it Tuesday, right? Because now it's Arlen Tuesdays. Yeah. So Tuesday, Arlen and I discussed a Supreme Court decision that had just been presented, which I think it actually came out Monday evening, but it was reported on Tuesday. We'll get to that in just a moment, but just to wrap up the relatively brief centering focus on Palestine from March 8th through, now that says April 3rd, so I got to fix. I thought, these are all these different things. I probably need to put on a some sort of a changer, right? Like a field, so that will update. There may be a way to do that. I'm not sure. Anyway, from March 18 through April 9, 2025, Trump and Netanyahu have killed at least 1,386 Gazans. So the lion's share killed while Harris and Biden were in power, but Trump is catching up. On Monday, the Supreme Court handed down a decision that was widely reported to be pro-Trump administration. Basically, it was presented as allowing the continued deportation, the continued seizure of people living in this country and simply disappearing them into a gulag in El Salvador, a cruel medieval style prison. We've seen some images. It's absolutely brutal there. And these are folks that presumably, although we don't know for certain because they just are spirited away, are not citizens and were not in this country illegally, or if they had somehow managed to get into this country legally with paperwork, they nevertheless, according to the Trump administration, were part of some sort of criminal enterprise, like a gang, a violent gang. So they would be simply seized and deported. We know even Trump's minions have acknowledged they made some, quote, errors, paperwork errors and the like, and these seizures and disappearances have been challenged. The court on Monday evening did rule that it was not going to hear a challenge to the disappearance of at least one person, and that they also lifted the stay by federal Judge Boasberg of the district court in D.C., saying that the Trump administration could not do this, that it simply could not do this. So the court said, we're going to lift that stay, and not only that, we're not going to consider the appeal of the deportation brought before us. But and I said, that this was characterized certainly by NPR as a win for the Trump administration, a loss for civil rights, a loss for human rights, a loss for humanity. But Arlen pushed back and said, well, no, the court did hold that the administration must afford the folks that it's deporting under, even if it claims it's under the Alien Enemies Act of 1796, which is the basis for these deportations. Even if it uses that ancient law, the people that it seizes and is going to deport, is going to send to this prison, must be afforded an opportunity to challenge that seizure and that disappearance, that removal from the country. They must be afforded an opportunity to question the government and the legitimacy of the evidence that it's relying on to claim that these people, that they're enemies, they're enemy aliens. And that is a win for humanity, right? That's a win for people to say that the government can't simply take you. The reason it was characterized as a win for Trump originally is because, again, the Supreme Court did not uphold the injunction from Judge Boasberg, which said you cannot do this anymore. You cannot continue this policy. What the Supreme Court said is, well, the policy can continue, but only if you afford the people you seize an opportunity to go before a court. But you can deport people under this law, maybe. They didn't even say for sure. They just said, well, we're not certain about that. We don't know. Regardless, the next person you seize, you have got to give them a court an opportunity to challenge their detention. So I do agree that seems like it's hard for me to characterize that as anything but really kind of a rebuke to the administration. The problem I have is that the court didn't order the return of the people that Trump's already seized. And it does feel as though the court is really trying to bend over backwards not to give Trump an opportunity to simply flout completely the court, to simply say, I'm not going to do what you tell me. Go ahead, try to stop me. I think that's what the court is really trying to avoid, is that possibility, which means that Trump will continue to push and push and push and continue to commit terrible crimes against humanity. I think it's a crime against humanity to seize dozens and hundreds of people and put them in some horrible prison, far from their families, far from people they know, they love, and often far from their country of origin as well. This is the prisons in El Salvador, and many of these people have never been to El Salvador. Many of the people seized have never been there. The basis for the court's ruling that it would not hear the appeal is that the appeal, the habeas corpus, must be taken in the state, in the venue where the challenger, the immigrant, is being held. And since most of them are in Texas, maybe Louisiana, by the U.S. government, that's where they're seized or where they're brought. That's where they have the right to seek habeas corpus. At least in the Boasberg case, it was a Texan, somebody seized in Texas. So it's, on balance, yeah. I mean, the concern, of course, is that Trump just won't do what he's ordered to do. It's interesting. There's a lot of little sort of nuances to parse, and I will probably talk more about this tomorrow. I do want to just give a big shout to Glenn Greenwald, who is a lawyer, just like I'm a lawyer, but he practiced a lot more recently than I did, I believe, and at a higher level too. I'm Well, I don't want to say that. I mean, lawyer's lawyer, but he was, as I understand it, doing very well, very successful in his career. But now he's a journalist. He's, I believe, left law. He lives down in Brazil. I don't think he practices. I could be wrong. I don't think he practices. So I learned a lot from watching his video this morning, listening to what he had to say. I'm actually taking these clips from The Guardian, which track what Greenwald presented on his program. System update, I believe is what it's called. But what I would say that Greenwald does, and he has a better discussion, so you really should watch his video if you have more interest in this, is he does provide you with actual quotes from the decision itself. I don't do that. I just didn't have time. I had a lot of prep to do and did a lot of other chores this morning, so I didn't have time for that. But there's no reason for me to have to do that anyway because Greenwald does a better job, like I said. But what the court ruled is that the claim by the ACLU and Democracy Forward that Trump illegally removed people from this country using the Alien Enemies Act was not right. They weren't going to decide that yet. What they were going to decide is that Trump has to give you a hearing regardless of what law he's invoking to remove you. So, good. We'll see whether this is meaningful, whether this does prevent future civil rights, obvious, blatant human rights violations by the Trump administration. We'll see whether it prevents some of them. Specifically, the ACLU was challenging that deportation of 238 men to El Salvador who had gotten no opportunity to challenge their arrest, their detention, and their deportation. Court saying, no, you have to give them something. You have to give them some process. And it was a unanimous decision. So it's really interesting. One of the arguments that you had, that I heard, and that I actually will admit I found not compelling, but I found persuasive, although they did not ultimately persuade me. But it had persuasive value, no question, in 2016, that one should vote for Hillary rather than Trump, is that Trump's justices would likely be worse. What we are seeing is that Amy Coney Barrett, one of Trump's justices, actually did side with the quote liberal, unquote minority, Ketanji Brown Jackson. And then there were the Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan. She sided with him. So all four women actually on the court. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. All four women said, no, you can't do this, period. And we're going to keep that. We're going to keep that injunction. We're going to tell you, Trump, you can't do this, period. Stop, full stop. But they all, including even Alito and Thomas, said anyone facing deportation had a right to challenge their removal, which I think is correctly hailed as a victory for due process. I am surprised. I am surprised that Alito, and even more so that Thomas, ultimately sided against Trump on that issue. That is kind of a shock to me. Look, they have lifetime appointments. They're not going anywhere. Maybe they just were persuaded by the arguments, or maybe if you're Thomas and Alito, you feel like, hey, we have already got a pretty limited amount of credibility, at least with anyone except extreme right wing nuts. This way we can show we can show a little independence, and it doesn't mean anything really because everyone's siding. It's going to be either 9-0 or 7-2 or 8-1. So we might as well just go with the majority. That may well be their rationale. I really don't know. But I would just note one more thing. This issue has really not gotten a lot of play from Congress. We haven't heard a lot from the Democrats. Nobody's really going, that I've heard, I'm not hearing a lot of Democratic Congress members making a big deal about this. They were talking an awful lot about the economy, about the tariffs, which, Trump has at least put a pause on until for all except for China. I'm kind of mixed on that. I would have liked to have seen what, would happen going forward with those tariffs. I have big issues with obviously the way they were implemented. There wasn't really a lot of thought behind them, but the economy, this quote free, unquote, trade economy has been an absolute disaster for working people. Something has to be done. Even a half-baked, half-assed tariff plan that isn't, intelligently designed to maximize job creation here and minimize price hikes at the same time, even a half-assed, perhaps AI-created plan, in my view, might well be better than the status quo. So I would have actually welcomed in some, fashion the implementation of those tariffs. Now, I get price hikes, if we saw those, would be very painful. I'm not sure how much the prices really would have risen. For example, we see huge price hikes in the price of eggs, and those aren't justified by economic conditions. Those aren't justified by the flu, the bird flu that killed a lot of chickens. It's just that the oligarchy that distributes eggs decided, hey, no one's going to stop us. We'll just jack prices up to $7, $8, $10 a dozen, even though probably, maybe, I don't know, maybe the right price is $6 a dozen. I got like 18 at Costco the other day for like $6.39 or $6.49. So they're managing to keep the prices lower. But if you don't have a warehouse near you, you may not get as low prices. Obviously, there's a lot of price gouging going on, and that's got nothing to do with tariffs. So I don't know how much pain would have been inflicted, but the real reason, the real way that tariffs can benefit working people is that you use the revenues. There's a lot of ways. They stimulate more job creation here, obviously, because the substitute good, the computer, the car, what have you, that's made or assembled overseas, the shirt that's sewed overseas, now costs more for the distributor, for the wholesaler. So that means that they will look for a substitute, which could and should include a domestic product. So that means greater demand for domestic products. That's good for working people. That's good for the people in the shop who make those shirts, who make those computers. That's good for them. But it will lead, yes, when you raise costs of manufacture, of production, yes, prices do rise some, although never as much as the cost rise. So that's one benefit, right? More jobs here and better wages here. But another benefit is that the revenues from the tariffs go to the government. So those can be used to offset taxes paid by poor, struggling, and working people. Those can be used to provide the support that poor, struggling, working people need to the extent that prices rise as a result of the tariffs. It could be, should be a win-win for working people. This is what you never hear on CNBC, on MSNBC. They're not going to talk about this. Tom Hartman used to talk about this, but now he doesn't because he's a partisan hack. He's not an honest broker. But that's how tariffs should work. The problem is Trump was going to use the revenue from the tariffs to cut taxes on billionaires. And that's, by the way, why the billionaire class, I know this was why Michelle Goldberg was very confused. We talked about this with Arlen. She couldn't quite understand why people like Bill Ackman would support Trump, even though they don't particularly like tariffs. She didn't quite get it. Well, because the tariff money revenues would be used to reduce Ackman's taxes. That's why. I don't really find it that difficult. Also, because Ackman likes having people who speak out in support of the Palestinian victims of the Israeli military. He likes it when those people are rounded up and deported into gulags. That's why Bill Ackman spoke. And it was a hard one for Michelle Goldberg. I get it, but there's your answer. All right, Democrats have not fought against the worst things that Trump does. They pay some lip service. They speak out when it comes to certain issues. What I think was about 20 who supported the Sanders bill to stop supplying the Israeli military with weapons of mass destruction. So Democrats, not even a majority of Democrats would support that. Not even a majority of Democrats said no to genocide, no to Trump's genocide. It's not even Harris Biden's genocide. It's Trump's genocide. And I don't believe that even a majority of them supported the bill to stop that, to stop the supply of weapons. So, I mean, what good are they really? But there are 15 Senate Dems. It's just extraordinary. I didn't know it was that bad. How can, and by the way, those 15 Dems, I don't know how much credit I can even give them. I mean, I guess a little bit, but they knew it was going to pass. They weren't doing anything that was going to really hurt Israel or really even hurt the Trump administration. Nothing. How can this be okay? How can you be a Democrat and think there's anything okay about this? Well, we have some younger folk. I think they're in my thumbnail. Let me see if I can show you that real quick, and I'll even try to. I can remember their names because first I had their first names and I took their first names out. So I just went with their last names. But let's see if I can remember their names. Yeah, I think it's, did I get it? Saycat. That's the one I'm not absolutely sure. I think it's Saycat Chakrabarty. Chakrabarty. He worked with AOC for a little bit. Let's see if we can get this picture up one more time. And I call it old wine, new bottles, because that's the question. Are these folks going to be different? Or are they going to be the same old corporatists? And I would say, and obviously, they haven't won anything, so who knows? They may not get anywhere. They may not get elected, but there's some mixed signals. There's a few little things that they're doing that I'm like, maybe, or that they've said that I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is a good thing, right? Maybe we have, but of course we said that about AOC too, right? I mean, we used to think, and for a moment in time, it appeared that AOC might really be progressive. She might really when I say she might really take on the corporate elites, the oligarchs in her party. She didn't do it. So will George Hernado, Kat Abu Ghazaleh, and Saycat Chakrabarty? We'll find out. But like I said, there's mixed signals. On balance, I'm going to say no. I think we've seen this movie before, and we've seen people that we've elected, and I can say even in Maryland, Jamie Raskin, I thought this guy's going to do some good stuff, and then he didn't. Right? I mean, he did a little, but on balance, what he did a lot more that was bad, that was harmful, than that was good. Even ostensibly progressive acts, like taking impeachment steps against Trump, really, in the end, were counterproductive and were foreseeably so at the time. I actually spoke about this at a meeting, why I was so dismayed at Raskin and his popularity. And a lot of people in my district were really, progressives were really angry at me and totally, went after me and said, oh, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback and say, well, he didn't succeed at the impeachment, but we had to do something at the time. And at the time, I was very clear. I thought the impeachment was a mistake. At the time in 21, I thought this was when progressive Democrats should be rallying support for Medicare for all. for a truly progressive policy agenda. That is what I was saying Raskin should be doing, and that we're wasting precious time with an impeachment that will make Trump more popular, that will not succeed. And won't get him out of office anyway, because he's not in office. So I was consistent. So I found that criticism absurd. Are these three, Hornato, Chakrabarty, and Abu Ghazali, are they new wine in old bottles, or are they new wine in new bottles? They're certainly new bottles. I mean, you know, they don't look like anyone I can think of in Congress right now, and they're young. So, like, their hair, it's not gray, and it's not, as far as I can tell, dyed. So there's a lot of reasons to think maybe they'll make a difference. But let's try to delve into this a little bit. So we'll start with Kat Abu Ghazali, and I think that's how I've said it several different ways, but I'm pretty sure it's Abu Ghazali. She is half Palestinian, half Texan, and she is running in Illinois. She says she is against the octogenarian. I did not know Jan Schakowsky was 80 years old, but she is. Would Kat Abu Ghazali do something different, anything different? She asks this question, what if we didn't suck? Here's her campaign video.
Donald Trump and Elon Musk are dismantling our country piece by piece. And so many Democrats seem content to just sit back and let them. So I say it's time to drop the excuses and grow a fucking spine.
All right, so first of all, the cursing, this is like a new thing, I guess. It's like you sort of are authenticating yourself. I've never been big on that. I feel like it kind of makes you look a little bit small when you do that, but we'll find out. She's not the only one of these candidates I noticed. But what is more relevant, I think, is that the first criticism she lodges against the Democrats is that they're not fighting hard enough against Trump Musk. They're not fighting hard enough to gum up the works. She doesn't bring up specific policy failings that the Democrats are responsible for, or talk about why Trump is in office in the first place, which it would seem to me are much better arguments against the current crop of Democratic Congress members, which is, you brought this on us. It's your fault they're here. It doesn't say that. So that right there was a problem for me. I think that's what you need to talk about. I think if I'm going to trust you, if I'm going to have confidence that you're going to really take on this Congress, it's not enough for me to hear that you're going to fight a little harder against Trump. But I need to hear, because look, there are plenty of people who fight hard against Trump, and I don't particularly have any great love for them. What I need to hear from you is you're going to fight for progressive policies, and you're going to fight against the people in your party who are preventing us from enjoying them.
Ghazali, and I'm running for Congress in Illinois' 9th district.
Let me just stop that for a sec, because I do want to hear her say her name one more time so I can make sure I get it just right. And I think she said Abu Ghazali, which I've been saying, so I think I got it right, but let's hear it.
Spine. I'm Kat Abu Ghazali, and I'm running for Congress in Illinois' 9th district. Unfortunately, this party has become one where you have to look to the exceptions for real leadership, as the majority work from an outdated playbook. We need a makeover, which means we need a vision that's bigger than what we've been told is possible. There is absolutely no reason you shouldn't be able to afford housing, groceries, and healthcare with some money left over. Families should have free childcare, Social Security should be expanded, and our inalienable rights shouldn't be dependent on who's in power. That means standing up to authoritarians, not shrinking away when the fight gets tough. And while current Democratic leadership might be fine cowering to Trump, I'm not. I've spent my entire career reporting on the far right. And
all right, I'll stop it there. We'll talk about that on her reportage. I do want to just underline that this is being presented to discuss this candidate, Kat Abu Ghazali, her announcement that she's running 26. So that's a year away, right? I mean, it comes up really fast. And she's running in Illinois. So is this someone we should feel optimistic about? And she's saying some good things. She really is. But again, she's not calling the real party with the real problem with the party is it's corrupt. That's what is, and it's an elephant in the room that she's not talking about. Why are they supporting genocide? Because they're corrupt. Why don't we have Medicare for all? Because they're corrupt. Why is college unaffordable unless you take on crippling debt? Because Democrats are corrupt. That's why. It's very, very simple. They're not pursuing policies that are good for the American people because they're corrupt, because they take money from the people who are taking advantage of us, who are stealing from us, robbing us blind, stealing our children's future, destroying our planet. It's all because of the corruption of that party. And the Republicans too, of course, but we expect them to be. That's who they are. They don't know, not even corrupt. They just believe that nonsense. But the party of working people takes money from the billionaire class and then does what the billionaire class wants. That's what we call corruption. That's the problem. She doesn't say it. I got a major problem with that. If you're not going to say it now, you'll never say it.
Hacked by them as a result. In fact, just a few months ago, Elon Musk's lawyers deposed me here in Chicago to ask about my mean tweets. Look, I thought comedy was legal again. This is all to say, I'm not scared of standing up to these people. I know how they think, and I know how to beat them. But my campaign itself is going to be different too, because I don't want to wait a year to help people. We're focused on meeting constituent needs with one simple rule. What if we didn't suck? My campaign and I would rather spend our money on book drives and clothing exchanges and public events than fancy fundraisers for rich donors. I also want my campaign to be as transparent as possible. That's why I'll be posting regular videos about the costs and steps of running for office. We all deserve better. We deserve human rights and financial freedom and a party that stands up to authoritarians. We deserve to thrive, not just survive. And I plan to fight for those ideals both on the campaign trail and in Congress. If you want to
again, she says some nice things there. I'll just cut it off because then it's like she's going to ask you for money. By the way, Kat Abu Ghazaleh, if you want more information about her, you can certainly find it. She's running in Illinois. I don't know, is it the 8th district? I don't know which one. Congress, Illinois 8. So it sounds good enough, but she doesn't she says, oh, I'll go after Musk. It's easy to go after Musk. It's easy to go after Trump. They're not your party. You're not pissing off the people that you're going to be trying to persuade to vote with, or that you sit down to lunch with, because they're not going to vote the way you want no matter what. They're not going to vote for Medicare for all, which Kat Abu Ghazaleh says she's for. She says she's for really good stuff. But you'll never get it with a party where only 15 of 49 or 48 senators voted for embargo of arms to Israel. And it's interesting because she is a Palestinian or part Palestinian, but yet she doesn't even seem to be taking that on as a major issue. So I want to go through this real quick because there's some things I liked, again, about Kat Abu Ghazaleh. She does put, this is a good thing. The other candidates we're going to center in a few moments don't do this. So I give her credit for this. I'm not like one of those, I'm pretty close to just saying a pox on every Democrat. But if, again, I'm waiting, right? It's sort of like you want to find a hen's tooth. The Democrat who will actually say, yes, this is a corrupt party. Yes, the people that I'm trying to unseat, the individual that I'm trying to unseat takes money from billionaires and then does what they want. And that equals corruption. By the way, that's something Bernie would not say about Hillary. That's one of the reasons he lost in 2016. He wasn't willing to call her out. So I give Kat Abu Ghazaleh credit because here she says, we do need single payer. But then she puts in that with an opt-out. Oh, I don't want to offend people. Like I don't want to offend unions who negotiate good health care for their rank and file. The problem is that those negotiations mean invariably that the rank and file gets lower salaries. So I have a problem with an opt-out. I think everything should just be government provided, right? I don't buy it. I understand the argument. I don't think you should be able to opt out. If you want to pay somebody, then you can pay them. But you shouldn't be able to opt out of this system. Maybe you can have some doctors who aren't part of the system that I could maybe possibly see. But even then, it's very problematic. And I've always been a believer in public financing, private delivery, the Canadian model, if you will. But this exception, the opt-out, is an argument, in my view, for the National Health Service in the UK. Because then everyone just works for the government. That's the end of it. Not a big fan of the opt-out, but I certainly wouldn't be a reason for me not to vote for her. I would almost certainly vote for her in a primary at this point, but I'm just making the argument. I'm not sure she's perfect. And I don't, the opt-out I'm kind of mixed on, because I understand the rationale for putting it in there. I really do. I don't think it's terrible. I'm not sure I love it either. From the New York Times, this article in the New York Times is what kind of triggered my using this topic today, this theme, will new faces bring about change? So I saw this, today's paper online. It's really not a paper. It's just a screen, a monitor they look at. But from Kellen Browning, the next generation of Dems don't plan to wait their turn in. I'm featuring three. The Chakrabarty is not featured in this. There's another Democrat, Deja Fox. I don't talk about her. I just didn't really get to her. The other names had sort of struck a chord with me. So they don't plan to wait their turn. But what will they do different? And to see again, let's look at what their record. So and this is again why I'm very mixed. Like, I liked some of the ways Kat Abu-Ghazaleh presented herself. But look at this. She's a former researcher for Media Matters. Media Matters is a hyper-partisan pro-Dem organization. They call it liberal advocacy, super Dem, super hyper-partisan Dem. In 2016, they would not report on any negative coverage. What Media Matters is supposed to do, their stated aim is to reveal right-wing and conservative bias in media. That's what they do. And they provide stories. They provide evidence, like from where Fox News, Newsmax, other corporate Republican and just plain old right-wing outlets present dishonest stories. That's what Media Matters does. So clearly in 2016, you had a real progressive, or as close as we could get to a progressive, and I think Bernie's progressive, running against a corporate Dem. So you'd think, right, if you'd think that if Media Matters' mission is to expose conservative bias, they would want to point out how the media is favoring Hillary over Bernie. They never did, not once, not one critical story of Bernie, no matter how dishonest, no matter how mendacious it might be, was not covered. They were never covered in Media Matters. Even if it didn't stem from Hillary, even if it wasn't unfair criticism that was repeating Clinton talking points, Media Matters simply would not report stories that were unfair to Bernie. This is a hyper-partisan group. Same thing in 2020. They would not report on unfair stories about Bernie. So I have an immediate question about Kat Abu-Ghazaleh for working there. Doesn't mean I totally am against her. It just means I question if she's really committed to even-handedness with regard to all progressives, all Democrats, anyone running to the left, or is it only those that are approved by the Democratic establishment? And if so, then it's not progressive in the least. Here's from The Nation. And by the way, she left Media Matters to go work at another, at this point, Democratic Party organ, Mother Jones. And it gives me no pleasure to say that. I used to think Mother Jones was a heck of a paper or a heck of a magazine, and it is no longer. It just, again, presents this guy, Kevin Drum, as the worst. He's like their lead and their editor as well, their publisher. These are Democratic hacks. They're not a progressive. And that's where she works now. That's where she writes now, as well as doing her podcasting. So she's a social media star, challenging a progressive stalwart. So does being a progressive media star, where does that suggest she'll really be progressive? I'm okay with it. You know, I do media. I wouldn't call myself a star, but I'm okay with that. But you're not really living the life, right? You're not really experiencing, you know, AOC's like, hey, I've lived it. I was a bartender. And apparently there's some question. Jen Perlman questions the authenticity of AOC's story. And certainly we've seen plenty of working class and poor folks like Clarence Thomas, once they get a taste of the good life, they forget all about where they came from and don't show any inclination to be anti-wealthy, anti-billionaires. But, you know, maybe there's some value to being truly working class. I don't know, being a social media star, I think that's kind of the fabulous, you know, fabulous, and it's not down to earth life. So I again, wouldn't stop me from voting for her, but it's not quite the same as being a Amazon warehouse picker, shall we say. So she says something that I actually have to say I liked when she's explaining why she's primarying Schakowsky, who is one of the more progressive Congress, right? She's not in any way, by the way, there's the phone. Let me see. We'll get you in just a sec, caller. I look forward to talking to you. Give me 1 second. I'll get you on the air. So just real quick, though, she's what Abu Ghazali explains her reasoning for supporting, for challenging Schakowsky is that she just hasn't been a good leader, that we need better, stronger leadership. And I've made this point over and over again that one of the big weaknesses in AOC and other progressives is that they continue to vote for the Hakeem Jeffries and the Nancy Pelosi's to be their leaders. Abu Ghazali doesn't say outright she wouldn't vote for Jeffries, but maybe that she wouldn't. Maybe she wouldn't. All right, caller, I got you. Who's this?
This is Vernon, Hal.
Oh, good to talk to you, Vern. How you doing?
I'm doing good. You're depressing me.
Oh, I'm sorry. What am I saying that's depressing you?
Everything.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm.
You got to give me something. You can't just say everything. That's not a fair answer.
Well, I haven't listened too much. I was just scrolling by and saw that you were live, and you're usually on earlier. And I thought, you know, and the very opening was, you didn't know, you sounded kind of, I don't know whether it's worth living another 30 years, something like that.
Yeah, I did. I know, right? I know.
I had a delay in that. I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to talk over you. I was just saying, yeah, I mean, I'm somewhat despondent. Yeah.
You know what? The problem we all have is our technology is in our face, and when you walk out into the world, unless you're at a demonstration like you do a lot of those, the world looks fine. So we need to get our faces out of these crystal balls.
Dude, you're kind of in and out. Is that some sort of an issue with the caller? What do you think's going on here?
I don't know. It might be a delay. Let me try and go off my earbuds and on speaker.
Oh, yeah, man. If you're using those horrible Apple things, those pods, yeah, they're a problem.
That sounds better. I don't need them.
There you go. So good to hear from you, and I'm flattered that you took a moment to tune in and stuck with me to call.
Well, Hal, you know that you're one of the few people that will call it as you see it. That you're not loyal beyond just because it's a party.
Oh, I hate the party. I hate that party. I hate both parties. I think I hate the Democratic Party, though. Vern, let me ask you, because you're a very bright and very observant man who's got a long, track record. I think the Democratic Party actually may at this point exercise more restraint and more control over its minions than the Republicans do. And I'm not saying that there isn't more disparity within the party. I think there may be more diversity of opinion within the Democratic Party. So if you go all the way to the left, maybe that's like Ilhan Omar or Tlaib or something, to the most conservative Dem. I don't know who that would be. Someone like, I don't know. The names don't even jump out at me, but whatever, some right wing or very pro hawkish Democrat. There's a pretty big difference between them. I don't know if you'd find as wide a difference in the Republican Party, but I think the Republican Party seems to be more tolerant of challenges to its orthodoxy.
Well, I think you're absolutely right there.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to let you go, Vern. I'm sorry. I love having your call, and it's nothing personal, but we're definitely having some tech issues. So I just dropped him, and I hope he, maybe calls back tomorrow. I'm not sure. Maybe there's an issue with the cell area. Usually we don't have these problems with the phone, so I'm going to hope it's not that issue. I do appreciate Abu Ghazali, though, and I appreciate Vern very much. I do appreciate Abu Ghazali, though, saying that leadership is a problem in the Democratic Party. She's right about that. And she also says they need to talk about Gaza. She talks about how she's part Palestinian, but I guess her mom's Palestinian. But it's not enough. It's not enough. She did work, in her writing, she supported Kamala, even if she never endorsed her. I tried to find out. It's not enough. You have to be more pointed in your criticism of the Democratic Party for me to believe that you'll be a change agent. All right, I'm going to go through the other two candidates quickly. I want to get through this today if I can. Here is Saikat, I believe, or Saikat Chakrabarty. I hope he says his name because I think I get his last name easily enough, Chakrabarty, but I'm sort of struggling with his first name. So let's listen to Chakrabarty. This is, by the way, I didn't try to cherry pick his shorts. This is one of his shorts from his page. He talks a lot about tariffs. He's very interested in economics. So that's what this is about.
Democrats, you got to stop providing cover for Donald Trump right now. So Gretchen Whitmer.
Let me just stop this for a second. What is his first message? Exactly the same as Kat Abu Ghazali's, right? It's, they're weak. The Democrats aren't taking on Trump. What Chakrabarty says is, you got to stop providing cover for Trump. Dude, take on your own party. I don't want you to tell me about how bad Trump is. I already know he's awful. I want you to show some real bold leadership by taking on your own party.
What she thinks of Trump's tariffs. And her answer was basically, tariffs aren't always so bad. I'm not exactly sure what I would be doing differently from Donald Trump on tariffs right now. And look, I get it. You want to talk about reindustrialization. I've spent the last 5 years trying to build actual plans for reindustrialization. But right now is not the time to be talking about the good sides of Donald Trump's tariffs.
That is just complete nonsense. What he's saying is completely false. What he's saying is we put partisanship first. We put our hatred of Trump ahead of good policy. If tariffs will lead, as apparently Whitmer recognizes, if a smart tariff policy, as opposed to the insane free trade that Democrats have pursued, if a smart tariff policy will lead to more jobs in Michigan, where Gretchen Whitmer happens to be the governor, then you talk about the good side of tariffs. Your job as a public official, as a public servant, is to do what's best for the people. If you're simply going to say Trump is the devil, everything he says is wrong, then you will throw baby out with the bathwater and you'll get worse policies than you might get otherwise. So Chakrabarty is completely wrong. He's completely off base here.
Crashing the economy. This has nothing to do with reindustrialization. What he's doing is going to wipe out more American manufacturers and American small businesses. Talk about the fact that
that's false too. I just don't buy that argument. I don't get that argument. if you may, I mean, is he saying if we impoverish? He's saying you're going to so impoverish working class people that they'll stop buying anything. They won't buy American goods either. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't agree with that. I don't see that. The stock market, see, and he's equating a stock market drop, a very significant one, no question. He's equating a stock market drop with a bad outcome, a recession for poor struggling working people. The stock market has skyrocketed over the past 8 years, and it's done little or no good for most people in this country. So you're wrong. You don't know you may know what you're talking about, but you're taking a hyper-partisan position. You're not taking a progressive pro-worker position here, Chakrabarty.
The plan. Talk about the fact that Donald Trump is using this to extort businesses and companies. You know, this is not the time to be trying to be bipartisan when Donald Trump is crashing the economy. He's literally destroying our economy.
So this is where I have a problem. It's just, again, the hyper-partisanship on both sides is a huge problem. And he's making it even worse. Chakrabarty is very much against the tariffs. He's made it clear. There's a lot of, like I said, videos about it. And I can't feel comfortable. You know, again, would I support him? He's challenging. Well, you'll see who he's challenging in a second. Maybe I would. He did work with AOC. He did work with Bernie. It's kind of odd because this is a guy who actually made his political bones, but you'll see in a second why he probably is against tariffs. He made his political bones with two of the more progressive members of the U.S. Congress. First Bernie, then AOC. But he is a tech millionaire. I presume he likes having his software developed overseas. He likes whatever he's doing that made him all that money. All of his stock in tech companies might lose a little value if the companies have to start paying the assembly members, the assembly people who build their units a decent wage. So I get it. I get it. His major issue, again, he doesn't talk about the corporate control, the corporatism, the oligarchy that runs the Democratic Party, just as Kat Abu Ghazali doesn't. Neither does say Kat, I hope I said his name right, Chakrabarty. His concern is Democrat leaders are paralyzed and unprepared. He's a self-made tech centimillionaire. So he's not. Now, again, I don't, just because you're poor, that doesn't mean you're going to govern in a poor, struggling, working class manner. And just because you're rich doesn't mean you're going to be a plutocrat. FDR is the great example, the counterexample. But again, his own interests, his own personal interests conflict with those of most Americans. So forgive me for being skeptical. Now, I do like this from his website. So again, there's a mixed bag. It's not all bad. I'm glad he's challenging Nancy Pelosi. But, this guy's not, he's not, we need candidates, this is what I would say, who are going to burn bridges. They're running for office. They're taking on the Democrats. They're calling them out corporate, hacks, corrupt, genocidal. Those are the words we need to hear from challengers. He says the Democrat Party needs to change. Sure. But he says Nancy Pelosi believes Democrats don't need to change. We have no idea what she believes. We know what she says. And we know how much money she's made from insider trading, millions. Her husband's made from insider trading, millions. We know that she rewarded over and over and over candidates based on their fundraising prowess and nothing else. By the way, hey, dogmatic muse, you're right, too much delay. The Dems haven't hit rock bottom yet until they realize they might be their own worst enemy. Well, I think they're our own worst enemy because their interests are so different than our own. So he goes on to say they need to stop acting like they're competing against a normal political party that plays by the rules. So again, for Chakrabarti, the problem isn't the Democrats, it's the Republicans. I agree with this, a bold vision to raise living standards, quality of life, and security. But what is that vision? It's very easy. Medicare for all, debt-free college, clean, green environment, tariffs, yes, tariffs to protect American jobs. I'm not, this guy doesn't provide, I had some positive vibes from Kat, very few from this guy. These are the same, it is old wine in new bottles, which is, supposedly a criticism, right? It's the same old wine, but I thought old wine, vintage wine is really good. Well, it can be. It can also be Plonk. It can also be vinegar. And maybe that's what the New York Times is telling us we get vinegar. Here is George Tornado from, what a cool name, by the way. I love that name. And he's Indiana. We've talked about this. There was a tornado there in Brownsburg where a friend of mine, who's a friend of the show, came on the show. A good friend of mine, Mike Olis, was on the show. He's from Brownsburg. There was a tornado there not too long ago. So tornado, that works. It's not really Tornado Alley, though. The tornadoes are really in Kansas and Oklahoma. But here's George Tornado.
We want this.
For nearly 20 years, we've had the same leadership in Washington.
That place, those people supposedly representing us, aren't working for Indianapolis. Safer communities, lower costs, a government that actually delivers. We're still waiting. From the Far East Side to Haaville, from Pike to Washington Township.
So you can tell there's that music, that rising music. It's kind of like inspiring and, like you're watching some kind of a puff piece for the Olympics. I mean, it's a feel good. And what he's saying, again, it sounds good, but where's the beef? Where are the specifics? He does have some. On balance, like Tornado, certainly better than Chakrabarti, but again, it's a little these kinds of campaign ads. They're not anywhere near what up to the scope of the problem that we face. They're not even close, and that's why I'm of the mind. Yes, we need to go outside this party. Would I vote for one of these people? Probably, if there wasn't a green running. Yeah, certainly in the primary, I would consider it. But I can't watch this and think these are folks who are committed to radical change, either in the Democratic Party or in our country at large. They're just not. Let's play some more, though, from Tornado.
Harder than ever, but falling further behind. The status quo is not working. Indy deserves leaders that fight for results, not just.
By the way, this ad would have been a really good ad for Kamala Harris. She didn't do it. She wasn't going to go after the Joe Biden economy. But Trump's been president for, 2-3 months, whatever it is. And the economy is still pretty much Joe Biden's. I understand we had the market crash, but unemployment, as far as I know, is basically where it's been. People are working harder and harder, falling farther behind. That's a feature of the neoliberal Democrat economy for which both parties are responsible. Kamala wouldn't go there. I give Tornado credit for going there to a degree, saying the economy isn't working. But again, it's a lot easier to do that when the president and Congress are in Republican hands.
We need better players on the field.
Because we can't let that team win.
And see, again, it's like it's teams. It's that team versus this team, not the American people. Remember Trump's ad where he said, she's for they, them, Trump is for you? That's the message that resonates. I'm not saying Trump is for you. I'm saying that was a good ad because he said, I'm for you. Tornado's saying that team can't win. No, your team should be the American people. not the Democratic Party. So again, it's not that they haven't learned. It's that these candidates, for all their vaunted talk about being youthful, challenging establishment Dems, challenging octogenarians like Schakowsky and Pelosi, or in Hornado's case, challenging Andre Carson, I'm not really familiar with, but I guess he's of the same ilk as those two. I don't know how old he is. He may not be that old. For all their vaunted talk of being insurgents, they're very timid. They're very weak. And that tells me that if they are elected, we'll just see the same old Democrats.
I'm George Hornado, and I'm running for Congress because Indy deserves better. I respect Congressman Carson, but after nearly 2 decades in office, too many folks are still struggling.
Why would we double down on the same people who got us into this mess?
These do-nothing Democrats, it's time for leadership that puts the people first.
Because this isn't about titles. This is about action. Indianapolis should be leading, not waiting.
So let me stop that again. So again, some decent stuff in there. They got us into this mess. That's okay. I mean, it's true. Indy should be leading. Okay, fine. Where are you going to lead us? Again, a lot of pablum, a lot of boilerplate, no specific. And by the way, you can put in specifics. You can easily put in specifics. You can say, I will absolutely support Medicare for all. I will not vote for a Democratic leader in Congress who is not a endorser of, is not a sponsor of Medicare for all. That's my litmus test. You could say, I'm going to vote against billions and billions of dollars for Israel. You elect me, I'm going to vote against that. That money should be coming to Indianapolis. You could say that. And by the way, if you said that, people would respond. People would be like, oh, wow, he's saying something. So that's what you do if you want to win. That's not what you do if you don't want to alienate billionaires.
Communities.
Obviously, they don't want to alienate billionaires.
Push for safer streets and advocate for affordable housing. And after George Floyd's murder, I worked with mayors across the country to deliver real change and rebuild trust.
All right, so I'd like to know, what is that change? Because he says, again, it's always boilerplate. It's always generalizations. What specifically did you do? I don't hear it. And I want to, I brought up that Trump ad where he says, she's for they, them, Trump is for you. Trump was pointing out a policy, that Harris had endorsed in 20, I guess, when she ran for president, or I don't know, something that trans get money in prison for their gender affirming care, something of that nature, which I, by the way, support. I think she was right. You're in prison, you should get psychological counseling, you should get mental health treatment, you should get it. But Trump brought up something that was really happening. He brought up a policy that really isn't hurting us, is really good for us, but it was a specific, right, that he talked about. But there's no specifics. I did something in the wake of the George Floyd murder by the police. Well, what did you do? Trump saying, this is what she did. She spent money to give gender-affirming care to inmates, which, by the way, we should be doing. Although Trump didn't say that. I won't do that. That's called specifics. That's what people want to see in ads. And this is not about, like some say, oh, it's the Republicans, it's a feeling. That's why people vote for them. No, they gave specifics. In that case, they agreed with something I very strongly disagree with, that we shouldn't be providing this type of counseling to inmates. But it was specific. So why don't you talk about specifics that people will agree with? Medicare for all, debt-free education, no more billions to a genocidal state, because people agree with that. Well, why don't you talk about it, Hornado? The only answer, you're afraid of the pro-Israel lobby. You're afraid of, you're afraid of the big pharma and the for-profit healthcare industry. You're afraid of the student lenders, the student loan sharks. That's why. It's really, 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 really disappointing. All right, I want to just give a little more about Hornado, because he actually, again, these aren't, it's not all bad. It's not all bad. I actually like some of this stuff. This is what AI provided me. So I hope this is accurate. This is what AI provided when I Googled Hornado Medicare for All. I couldn't confirm this. This is what AI says, is supporting the idea of Medicare for All in Indiana. He, along with other individuals like Marion Glick, are advocating for a publicly financed, privately delivered healthcare system at the state level. Now, I support that. I like that too. I like publicly financed, privately delivered. So that's a really good thing. Why didn't you talk about it in your ad? It makes me skeptical that you really believe in that. But that's a real positive. So again, it's mixed. It's not all bad. But if you go to his website, by any means, it's not all bad. But if you go to his website, it's boilerplate. It's non-specific. You know what's specific? A publicly financed, privately delivered healthcare system. That's specific. We all know what that means. We're paid tax money, and then when we go to the doctor, we go to whatever doctor we want, and they don't work for this government. They just send the government the bill. That's what that means. That's pretty clear. This isn't clear. We need bold leadership. The fair shot agenda. Real results. He lists some areas, but he's no specificity. We need to strengthen neighborhoods and ensure every Hoosier can thrive. I love it. I agree. Who's going to oppose that? That's the problem. You got to be willing to take on entrenched interests, the establishment that will not like the policies because they will cost the billionaires money. That's what we need from those who are challenging Democratic incumbents. And unless they do that, vote green. Now, to be fair, if you look at the bottom of Hornado's website link here, this page, it says full agenda coming soon. Detailed policy plans for each pillar will be published here. So maybe he'll deliver what I'm asking for. I hope he does. Real specifics. And I would be happy to center him and support him. And maybe we'll get Mike on to talk about him. I don't know I think Carson is Olis's Congress member, so we'll see what he has to say about Hornado. All right, so that's going to do it for today's Halitics. Tomorrow is the free-for-all, so please call in, and you can tell I'm still a little congested, but I'm hopefully on the mend and will feel better. And we'll continue to look at candidates like these three to see whether maybe we can expect a little bit of change, a little bit of movement to the left from what has been tragically a very pro-corporate, very problematic party, the Democrats. So you have a great afternoon. I'm Hal, and I will be back tomorrow. Thank you, by the way, Vern, for calling in. Thank you, Dogmatic Muse, for commenting.